Hi everyone, do not get distracted with all this lucky MSI Dragon over here. My main focus is to share with you my experience on this motherboard known as the X870E Carbon Wifi. Before I begin, I'd like to thank MSI to have provided all these dragons and the motherboard for me to share with you guys. And also to Cobel to have done the arrangement on the delivery. These are all the accessories that come in the box. I'll start off with this. You will be provided with a leaflet of stickers where you have the nice MSI badges, and this round circles is meant for your CMOS battery. Additional stickers on the Lucky Dragon, and over at this section, these are all the labeling stickers for your fan, for your RGB or ARGB connector cables, and the SATA cables. You will be having this quick installation guide that shows you the very basic of how you mount the processor and such. Now this is very important, whereby you can scan all this QR code to register your motherboard and to find out more about the MSI reward programs, and also to download the application like my MSI membership application to have more information about MSI products and their reward programs or even events. Now as for this shout out for MSI, in fact they did give you another leaflet. Now this QR code over here is similar to this, whereby again you can register your MSI product and to post your reviews regarding of what you feel about the product when you use it, or even to give feedback stated that what kind of improvement you want to foresee MSI doing in future. And as for this booklet over here, which is the European Union Regulatory Notice, I wouldn't know what this is, but it's provided. So if you're staying in, if you're staying in Europe, right, you can have a readout on this and see what this helps you on. Now besides this, you'll be provided with this antenna here, the Wi-Fi antenna, which this end, right, plugged to your motherboard. Now if you have not noticed, right, the feature about the antenna, how it's being plugged to the motherboard, it's not screw on, whereby this, right, is just clip on, a fast reaction, which I'll show you later. So this is the antenna itself, and this is the base, and the base itself is magnetic. So in the event if you want to place this on your case, which is made of metal, be it the top or the side, right, you can just magnet it and it will be in place. Else some of the base, right, from some other motherboards, they do not have this magnetic function, which I show you over here. So imagine that you plug the antenna and you place it at the top, right, you will just move about. So this will stop it from moving. Coming to the rest of the accessory, I'll start off with the SATA cable. You are provided with two, one right angle, one straight. Next will be this. This is the extension cable for your ARGB, which is 3-pin 5V. Where you can see this end, right, this is a JST03 connector, where you can see this kind of connection. So if your fan's having this kind of connection, right, you can make use of this extension, plug the standard 3-pin 5V to your motherboard header, the ARGB header, and over this end, right, you can just clip out to your fan. And this is another RGB connector, not ARGB. Now there's a great difference between ARGB and RGB. ARGB are for addressable, RGB is meant for static, non-addressable, and the voltage is different. As you can see over here, right, it's 4-pin. This is 12V 4-pin, which is meant for RGB, and it splits to 2. So your motherboard do have that. This is just an extension. Next, you will be provided with this M.2 clip. This is for spare. In the event if your motherboard clip is damaged, right, you can replace this. And to remove this clip, you will need this tool. See, it's hexagonal shape, where this is hexagonal shape. So you use this to unscrew the clip in order to replace on your motherboard, which I'll show you later. Now, I will not unpack this package. In fact, this is the USB thumb drive. Make sure you do not lose this, because this is very essential. Reason being, right, when you start to install Windows OS on the motherboard itself, you will need to have this, as it contains the driver of your RJ45 and your Wi-Fi. So make sure you have this and do not lose this. Coming to here, right, this is a proprietary connector whereby it's connected to your motherboard. I will show you later, and it splits off to your fan header, additional fan header, additional USB connector, and your ARGB connector. So it's pretty handy. Next, for this is the extension for the front I/O connector, whereby you connect this directly to your motherboard. See, this is all the pins that is in one piece, and over at this end, right, this is where you plug your front I/O case connectors right to it. I wish that MSI in fact label all this so it's easier, because right now you don't have labeling like your front power connector, your power LEDs, your reset switch, and your reset and your hard disk LEDs. This is a ATX form factor motherboard. It has 8 layers of PCB, and all the traces of the copper lines to the various connector and the socket is of 2 ounce. The design of the motherboard is very sleek. Starting from the top, as you can see, there are 2 very beefy aluminum heat sink for the VRM, and more heat dissipation will go through the back. Reason being, there is a connected heat pipe between these 2 heat sinks. And at the rear I/O, at the top over here, this is made of plastic, and this dragon crest over here does have ARGB effect lit up. Same goes to the top M.2 slot, whereby you have this armor shield. The wording here, carbon, it will have the ARGB effect too. And at the lower section, this is the whole M.2 armor shield or the heat sink, whereby you can remove the whole shield right by just pressing at the back. See, when I press it, you can just remove this off, and you will expose the whole area. And do take note that they have done it in a way that this whole piece, right, not only dissipate heat out from the M.2, but from the 2 X870E chipset, which is side by side over here. So in order for you to clip this back on, right, you just have to align at the front, see, and clip it back. Same goes to the top. It's toolless. You can just press at the back, lift it up, and it's going to expose the M.2. At the back of this motherboard, it doesn't come with a back plate, and I wish that MSI did a back plate, since this is actually a premium board, just to strengthen the structure of the motherboard. Now, as for the measurement of this motherboard, starting from here to here is at 305mm. From here to here is at 243mm. Now, as for the side VRM heatsink and the rear heatsink, the measurements are as follow. At the side, this is measuring at 35mm in height, and at the rear, as you can see, there is this thing protruding out. So I will just calculate at the rear over here. This is at 43mm. And why am I telling you this measurements, right? Because some of you might need it when you mount thick liquid AIO radiators. The power phase of this board is at 18 plus 2 plus 1 and has 110 ampere choke. At the center over here, this is the 17-1800 socket, whereby it supports AMD processor of 7000, 8000 and 9000 series. At the lower section, you have 4 DIMM slot. This is only meant for your DDR5 RAMs. Please do not put any DDR4. And it has a max capacity of 256 gig of RAMs. And it runs in dual channel and have a max EXP profile, or should I say the overclock profile, at 8400. Now, most of us will purchase dual RAM kit, as in like 32 gig kit, 64 gig kit and such, to populate 2 DIMM slot. If you want to populate 4 DIMM slot, please do not purchase another set, as in like one set dual of the same RAMs and to populate over here. Yes, it can run, but it can only run at default either 4800 or 5600. It will not be able to clock to your X-Pro profile. I've tried many times, it doesn't work. If you want to run the X-Pro profile, right, make sure you purchase RAM kit of 4 sticks. That means to say quads, not dual channel, for you to run the X-Pro profile. Now, there are a total of 3 PCI-E slots, which is the top, the middle, and the bottom. These 2 are generation 5, which is controlled by the processor. And at the bottom, this is generation 4, which is controlled by the X870E chipset. Now as for the speed, this is X16, this is X4 and X4. Now you might be asking me, hey Kyo, the previous board, which is X670E, the middle section PCI-E, right, is running on X8. How come this is running on X4? The reason being, right, there's not enough lane. That's why they split the X4 to your rear USB port, which is this too, which is catered for 40 gig transfer rate, and also as a DP port, as in like a display port to Type-C monitor. So that's the reason why this motherboard, the center section, right, it won't run at 8x, it will run at 4x. And there are total of 4 M.2. Starting with the top, this is Gen 5, controlled by the processor, and followed by the 3 over here, which the second one is controlled by the processor, and these two are controlled by the chipset. Another thing to take note, if you're running a 7000 series or a 9000 series AMD processor, all the Gen 5 lanes, be it the M.2 or the PCIe Gen 5, it's backward compatible. But something to take note, if you were to populate a graphic card on the first lane and you want it to run on X16, kindly do not populate the second M.2 slot and the second PCIe slot. If you're going to populate this two, right, this is not going to run at 16x, it will run at 8x. And also another thing, if you are using a 8000 series AMD processor, all these lanes over here, right, be it the M.2 or the PCIe, these are all Gen 4 and not Gen 5. And the second M.2 slot will be disabled. This section I'd like to emphasize on how well MSI have engineered their M.2 slot, based on the fact that it's catered for both single-sided and double-sided. As you can see, the M.2, this is double-sided. I mean, the chip is on double side or single side. Now for single side, right, you need not have to remove off the thermal pad covers, which some of the motherboard you have to remove off because you don't have a separator like what MSI have done with all these rubber studs. So you can just plug it in and to push it down. Now I didn't put it at the top because there is this thing blocking. This is double-sided. So imagine that this is single-sided and this is flush in. Okay. Let's say I plug it in and it flushes in. And with the top peeled off, right, when you cover this back to the M.2, right, where it sits, this rubber pad will cushion this up to touch the pad at the top. And if it's double-sided, remove off this rubber stud, remove off the cover of the thermal pad, same goes to here. So when you slot in, right, assuming this is over here, when you slot in, right, it will cushion on both the bottom and the top, I mean the thermal pad, so it touches both areas. Nicely done. Now as for the locking mechanism, right, is even more wonderful. Now at the top section, this is not the mechanism of this tree at the bottom. At the top, it's still using the old method. Let me just zoom in and show you. See, you have this clip over here that swivels from side to side. So when you mount this in, right, assuming this is in, you will need to lock it in place by swiveling this. Else, for the bottom section, you have this clip. So when you place your M.2 in, you can just push it down. It's toolless and you will just lock in place. And if you want to release, just press this clip towards the back and this will spring out. So take a look at the mechanism. So this is lock position. This is unlocked. See? And in the event, if you were to damage this clip over here, the M.2 clip, you can remove this and to replace it with the spare, which I've shown you earlier on. So how do you remove this is by this hexagonal key. So this is actually, see, when I swivel the bottom plate, right, it's intact. So if you use this and to unscrew it, see, this is off. You can just remove this clip and to replace the spare. Nicely done. Now speaking about the armor shell itself, some of you might wonder that how am I going to place this back. Okay, let me just zoom out. As you can see, right, in front Now, before I talk about clipping it back, another good point whereby MSI have thought about it, because the X870E chip is side by side over here, they have extend the armor shield, or should I say the heatsink, right, all the way to the front. In fact, this whole piece is aluminium, and to enhance on heat dissipation, inclusive of the M.2, right, this is the whole plate. See, it covers the whole thing. So more heat will be dissipated through this area and through this area. Nicely done. Now, another thing is that whereby some have asked, how do I align this? What you need to do is just align this width to this width. As you can see, there are two catch over here that catches this point. So what you need to do, right, just angle it 30 degree or 45 degree, right, just place it here. Okay, pull it backwards and you'll feel the catch. Okay, let me just explain again, right. See, it sits and you just push it down. This is toolless. And to release, right, make sure you press this at the center. See, you just take it out. Same goes to the top, whereby you line this notch over here, right, against the clips over here. Just align it and press it down. And one thing good about this, right, as I mentioned to you, this is the ARGB lighting areas on the carbon. How they actually do it, as you can see, there are no wire to it. It's done by this pin pole over here to this at the bottom. Okay, let me just zoom in. See? And this is magnetic, so you will hold in place and not shake about. Okay, you have to place this back. See, it will not shake about. You will stay in place with the contact. Nice touch, well done. In fact, I really like how they actually design. They have thought throughout on how to design the pads and how to separate the pads, so that if you use single-sided, right, you don't have to remove the bottom pads. Nicely done. Next thing will be the PCI-E slot. As you can see over here, right, if you slot a card in, okay, this will lock in place. If you want to release, right, in the past you need to press some lever at the side, which is very difficult. Instead, MSI have done this beautiful mechanism. When you press it down, this will release. Okay, take note on this. This is locked. When you press it down, it will stay unlocked, and you can remove off the card. And if you want to place the card back, you just slot it in and to press this, and you will just lock. Nice touch. This board is equipped with a ALC 4020 audio codec, which is 7.1 channel or surround sound, and it's of high definition. In order to trigger the 7.1 surround sound, you will need to make use of the SPDF socket over here. If you do plug the device or speakers, right, on the line out, right, this will only cater for 2.1, so take note on this. As for the connection point, starting from the left, this is meant for your front microphone and headphone jack, followed by a 12 volt RGB connector, a 3-pin 5 volt ARGB connector. This is addressable, this is not, so take note on this. Most of the time we will be using the addressable. 2 sensor socket, whereby you purchase an additional cable where you can plug individually to take individual readings of where you place the sensor on your motherboard, and the temperature will reflect on hardware info 64 or either 64. Next will be 2 4-pin PLM fan header, followed by a PCI-E socket, and this is where you plug your power supply 8-pin PCI-E connector to this to supply power in order to have fast charge function on your Type-C, which is at the front, and the max wattage of charge is 27 watt. Next, you have another 4-pin PWM fan header, 2 USB 2.0 socket, another 3-pin 5 volt ARGB connector, a reset switch, and a power switch. Now, this is useful when you are testing this board outside the case, where you have a start and reset, or you are doing some, overclocking and such before you want to place back to the case, right? You can make use of this button. And at the event, if your system is on standby, right, there will be LED littered over here. And if you find it very irritating or annoying, you can switch it off by using this switch. Next, you have the safe switch, whereby if you engage this, right, having a screwdriver touch on this and you power up, the system will boot default BIOS and will not boot with what settings you have set. So this is one of the neat function. Next, followed by the clear CMOS button. Assuming you have done all the settings on your motherboard in your UEFI and you want to reset everything by default, you can just turn on your machine and short this 2-pin, which is the clear CMOS, hold on it for 5 to 10 seconds, let go, and all will be resetted to default. Next will be the front connector, whereby you have the power switch, the power LED, the reset switch, and the hard disk LED. And right on top of here, right, this is meant for your internal speakers if you have that. And as for this two, right, I wouldn't know what these two are, so I'll just skip. Moving to the front, you have two 3.0 front socket connector for your front I/O. For your Type A USB port, 4 SATA port. Now take note, if you to populate all 4 SATA port, right, it will not affect or disable any lanes on your M.2 when you're using the 7000 series or the 9000 series processor. So take note on this. Next will be the Type C, which I mentioned. This is meant for your front I/O Type C connector. Now this is the proprietary connector where I showed you earlier, right, which is this cable, which one end, this end connected to here, and it splits to these 3 cables, which give you additional function of the front connection point, just like over here. So this is another point where you can connect it. Next, you will have the ARGB connector and the additional fan connector. So you can make use of this, but I would say that this is rather flimsy. I will not be using this for my personal preference, just for your information. Next will be a 24-pin socket where it draws the power from your PSU and to supply the power to all the components like your RAM, your M.2, your SATA and such. Next will be a digital LED debug, where this is very useful to troubleshoot, and it includes this LED debug LEDs. Like for example, you just typed up like your RAM is not functioning, your graphic card is not functioning, or even you can't boot up and such. So this is an additional reading, but I would prefer to look at this because this is in-depth. It gives you the code and you can refer to the instruction manual, right, and to see what is the actual description of having the board not able to boot up and such. Next will be a 3-pin 5V ARGB connector again, and a 4-pin PWM fan header. Right at the top, you have 3 more additional 4-pin PWM fan headers, whereby one of them is meant for your pump, which is this. No, this is system. This is pump. Yeah. And this is for your CPU fan, which is meant for your radiator fans or your air cooler fans. So make sure you plug them accordingly. And right at the rear over here, you have 2 8-pin EPS connector. I would say that for basic function use, right, if you're not doing extreme overclocking, right, you only need to plug one, which is the back. This is power 1, this is power 2, and these are of solid pin. There are plenty of input and output socket at the rear, starting off with the 2.1 HDMI socket, and this make use of the APU, which is the integrated graphic on your processor, and it has a projection rate of 8K 60Hz, and there are total of 9 USB type A port, as you can see here, all in red, and all these are of version 3.2 generation 2, meaning to say all this is capable of transferring up to 10 gig of data. And at the bottom, there are a total of 4 USB type C port, whereby this two, it acts not only as a data transfer port, it also acts as a display port, which is version 1.4. If you use this as a data transfer port, it can go up to 40 gig, which these are USB 4. And as for DisplayPort is version 1.4, making use of the APU or the integrated graphic on your processor, right, is able to project out to any monitor that has a Type-C connector up to 4K 60Hz. And right over here, there are 3 buttons over here, starting with the BIOS flashback, whereby you download the updated BIOS and you want to do it through this route, right? You can just plug the firmware over here or the thumb drive over here that contains the latest BIOS. As you can see, this is with a rectangular line. So this is where you should plug and when you press this, right, holding it for 3 seconds or so, when it starts flashing, right, you can just let go, and you will just flash the BIOS without having the processor on the motherboard. Just need power, that's it. Next will be the clear CMOS button. If you intend to clear the CMOS, instead of reaching out to the motherboard where you have to short it, you can make use of this button. Again, hold on it for 5 to 10 seconds, let go, and you will clear all the settings on your UEFI. Next is the smart button. I will guide you through on how to make use of this button later on the UEFI and to show you the actual way of using this. Next, you have these two RJ45 connector. They are of Realtek. One is 25 gig and the other is 5 gig. Next, you have this Wi-Fi 7 socket where you connect the antenna over here. As mentioned to you earlier, this antenna comes with the board. And in the past, right, as mentioned to you, you need to screw this to the socket. But for a new invention, what MSI have done, right, you can just plug it in and that's it. Same goes to the bottom. And if you want to unplug, just pull it. You don't have to screw it. It's very easy. Next, you have the audio socket over here. The top is the line out, and this is the mic in, and this is the SPDF out. Now, as mentioned to you earlier, right, if you want to activate 7.1 channel surround sound, you will need to use the SPDF out. Unless you have only just a monitor speaker or just 2.1 version 2.1 speakers, right, you can just connect to this line out. This is the UEFI interface of this Carbon X870E, whereby it starts off with the EZ mode. And in this EZ mode, right, you will be given details like your motherboard info, your BIOS version, the motherboard temperature, and the build BIOS date. And followed by all the processor that you're using. For me, I'm using a 9950X right now. Then what are the RAMs that you're using and what are the capacity and such, you will list over here, inclusive of the M.2s, which I have not plugged in any at the moment, just to show you the BIOS. And the fan profile, of course, if you have a liquid AIO has a pump, right, you will show the pump and such. But right now I'm just plugging in just a default air cooler, which you can see the temperature is pretty high, but it's not going to do anything. It's just to show you the UEFI, so it's pretty fine. Then over at the top left, right, where you see this CPU game boost, right, this you can turn on and off. I believe this is to boost the frequency while you're playing games. It's just one click. Then this MPU, in fact, is a enhanced AI boost on your overclocking. Right now it's grey out. I believe at a later version firmware update, right, on the BIOS, right, this will be enabled, because I know that this processor is capable of doing this. Then this is the memory where you can set the the expo profile. You can see Urban XMP1. This is in fact if you have RAMs that is dual for expo and XMP, right, you can trigger this. And it happened that this King Bang RAM have dual profile. I can set this too, but I would prefer to set it at expo 1. Besides this, right, on the easy configuration, you have all this over here. You can set your precision overdrive, which is the PBO2, very famous for AMD. If you don't want to do it manually, right, all is listed over here. You can just toggle according to the mode that you wanted. As in, like, to set the thermal point not to exceed certain temperature at max load. And if you want to configure manually, right, I'll show you later on the advanced mode. Then next is the memory tray, whereby you have the fixed bus frequency, but you want to try at a tighter, I would say the cache latency, which is the timing of the RAMs itself. You can select over here, set it higher bus speed, tighter RAM cache latency and such. You can try. So in the event, if let's say, okay, for example, default you are setting an expo, and when you did this try, right, the system will boot and will try to determine whether your RAMs can cater for that speed. If it doesn't, right, it will go back to your default of what you have set, which is expo 1. Graphic card detection, whereby it will detect which graphic card that you have plugged into, probably let's say a 4070 or 4080 and such. It will just detect over here. You can select, because this processor has a inbuilt graphic card, so you can select this as a detection. Then for MSI driver utility installer, this by default is enabled. This will allow you when you install Windows 11, right, for the very first start, fresh Windows 11. So when you boot up, right, it will prompt you to update all the drivers and chipset of this motherboard. So it's a very good function. Leave it as enable. Or sometimes when you reset your BIOS, right, and you don't want this to prompt when you boot up the Windows. In fact, your Windows have already installed properly and such. You can disable this. Default home page is none, or you can set system status and such and so forth. I'm not going to go into it, just to show you. Then over at this section, right, you can set this to on by default, and this is, sorry, by default is off. You can set it to on, whereby the CPU fan header, right, if you do not plug in anything, right, the system will just prompt that, oh, you don't have a CPU fan, connect to it. But I'll just set this as default off. Temperature unit, as you can see here, right, this is actually in degrees Celsius. You can toggle this to Fahrenheit. See, it goes to Fahrenheit. So this is how it looks like. Then this is meant for your FTP M version 2, which is on for you to install your Windows 11, which is one of the prerequisition. Now, the EasyLed control, right, if you do toggle this as off, you will not be seeing the debug LEDs, right? And ERP, these are all the power management thing and the slider of the animation, which you will see. Okay, the sliders, right, mean to say for advanced, let me just show you. When you press on advanced, right, see, this is actually the animation on my left. You can disable this, but at all times, right, I would prefer to use the keyboard. Now, that is on the easy mode, and at the top you have all this like M-Flash. If you intend to make use of this UEFI to upgrade your BIOS firmware, you can go through here. Then next will be your favorites. You can take down all the favorites that you want to do, settings and such. Now coming to BIOS slot, right, this is meant for you to take a glance of what you have done, the changes. Like earlier on, I've done the Expo profile, right, it will be listed, oh, nothing changed. Okay, so what I'll do is I will just do this. If I'll do this, okay, your log will show, see? So it's just showing you the history of what you've done with the configuration. Then this MSI performance preset, right? Now, when you click on this, right, you can set it to enable or auto. So I just set it to auto. This is PVO enable. This is over one click function whereby you didn't declare anything over here, as I mentioned to you, right? See, you didn't declare anything over here. You just enable, that's all. So you just pick whatever cooling you have done to the processor, you will just boost all the way to the max. And I wouldn't advise to make use of this, reason being, right, if you were to toggle this, let's see, this to enable, right, your temperature will be very high on the processor. So take note on this. So I rather set it manually through this section over here where it says precision overdrive, and you set it accordingly to your thermal. Now this is just one click. If you want to do further tweaks and such, right, I will show you on the advanced method. Now next will be the smart button. When I click on here, right, you can see front and rear. On the front, right, if you have plugged the reset case reset connector to the front I/O of your motherboard, right, you can set the reset switch to this settings where you say LED off and such. Now LED off, that means to say you are turning off the ARGB on your motherboard, which is the rear I/O panel, or the carbon word on the M.2. Save boot is whereby, as I mentioned to you, right, if you, in the event if you can't boot the system, right, if you set to save boot, right, instead of shorting on the motherboard itself, when you press on the reset switch at the front, it will just boot the default BIOS setting instead of your configuration that you've done on the BIOS. Hope that makes sense. Then this turbo fan is a quick switch button whereby you bypass. Okay, if you were to press the reset switch and you have set the smart button to turbo fan, right, what it does is on the fan profile, which is this, okay, hardware monitor, it will bypass this and you will toggle everything to the max. So this is actually what it meant by this over here. Alright, turbo fan. Now at the rear, I'll show you some of the buttons where you have this last section, we say smart switch. Now I'm going to show you later on what happened. Take a look what I've configured right now. I've set it to LED on off. Okay, take note on this. I'm just going to click OK. So this is basically the interface of the EZ mode. Now I'll take you to the actual mainboard and to explain to you what do you mean by setting this, okay, the smart button to LED on off. Now as you can see over here, right, this is the ARGB effect on the Dragon, on the rear IO, and the word carbon. See, these are all the ARGB effects on the motherboard. Now in the event if you want to turn this off, right, physically, as I mentioned to you, I programmed the rear, or should I say the back, smart switch. So if I were to toggle the smart switch, see, it's off, inclusive of the power button and the reset switch. If I press it back again, it's going to be back on. See? So this is what you meant by the smart switch. You can set the smart switch as reset or even the fan turbo mode. Now, I mentioned about this switch over here on my lower right. Now, this also acts as a physical switch whereby you don't have to program. If you want it physically off, you just turn it off. Everything will be off, including the reset and the power switch. If you want to turn it back on, just turn it on. These are the smart button settings that you can do with the front reset switch and the rear smart button. Now moving along, you can save the profile. Let's say you have configured all the settings in this EZ mode. You can save the profile by clicking over here. Now either you click the button over here to say save, or you press F9 and you will select the profile that you want. You can rename it. So in the event once this is saved, right, if your BIOS get corrupted and you clear the CMOS, you can come back to this page and to load the profile of all your previous settings. Next will be the hardware monitor, whereby you can set your fan curve over here, as you can see, based on the graph. See, with your mouse. Or I would prefer to set based on the temperature. Let's say this is 80. Then next I will set it probably 80% or such, which is this. See, take a look at the graph point over here. It will drop. If I'm going to set at 100, see, it will just shoot up. So these are things that you can play with. And of course, this is in PWM mode. If you set it to DC, right, meaning to say your fan is of 3-pin plug, you can set the curve too, but based on voltage. Alright. Now, over here, help, I will just skip. Language, you can set the language that you understand. If you understand Japanese, you can set it Japanese, Korean, or etc. Now for the search button, right, in the event if you want a shortcut, as in like you don't want to click here and there, you just want to do some setting, let's say for example your RAM speed, so you can just click on the search and type RAM. See, this is what you can do. And this is screenshot. Now if you have populated M.2 in your motherboard, or having a USB thumb drive, right, you can just do a screenshot and to save to either drive, which is handy. Exit, I don't have to say, I don't have to mention, where you save all the configuration that you've done and to exit and to boot to Windows. Now coming to the advanced mode, I will only talk about certain things that I will do. Under system status, right, I will configure, under system status, I will configure the system date and time. And I'll leave this ESA. I have tested this, the ESA style. If I were to disable this, right, when you reboot, right, it would not take you to the this UEFI interface. It will take you to a very old BIOS interface. So do not disable this, because on the old BIOS interface, right, I had a hard time looking for the ESA style to set it back to this interface. So don't try that. Now on advanced, I will touch on PCI-E subsystem settings, whereby I set the resizable bar for my discrete graphic card, and all this M.2 slot, the PCI-E slot and such, I will configure them according to my device, as in like what generation they are. For example, let's say all my M.2s are Gen 4, so I will set all of this to Gen 4. In my PCI-E, I know that my graphic card is running on Gen 4, I will set it Gen 4. Reason being, right, when you boot up, it will bypass the auto detection or verification. The system will know that, oh, you're using this generation of that device, and it will just boot faster. Now we're going to set it back to auto. Next will be the integrated perahertz. Again, whatever device or port that I don't use. Take for example the LAN port. You have two. One is 2.5 gig, one is 5 gig. Now I will not use the 2.5 gig. Instead, I'll use the 5 gig. And I hope that MSI do label this. You know, there are two LAN port. They do label this as in like 2.5 or 5 gig. Makes things easier. So for example, let's say this is 2.5. I will just disable it and leaving the 5 gig on. Same goes to the Wi-Fi. If I don't use Wi-Fi at all, just the Bluetooth, I will just set it to Bluetooth. Same goes to the audio. I'm using an audio interface, so I don't use onboard audio. I just disable this. Now, by doing all this, right, what you're trying to do is to tell the system that, hey, don't have to verify, don't have to auto detect, search for yourself, as in such, just boot according to what your setting is. So this will will save time, save heaps of time to boot up. Now, as for smart button and rear smart keys, right, I believe you know what these are, which I show you on the easy mode. See? Now, besides this, right, I will also toggle the wake up event setup, whereby I set this resume by PCIe device to enable. Reason for this, right, I do have a program on my smartphone to toggle and to wake up my system. As in to wake up or to start up my system remotely. I don't have to press the power button. Now, besides this, what else do I do? Oh, speaking of which, right, this MSI driver utility installer, this is very important. Leave it enabled, because when you do a fresh installation of Windows OS, right, when you boot it, when you boot up, it will prompt you to download all the necessary chipset driver, all the host adapter and such. It's all auto, instead of you having to go to the motherboard website to download the drivers and to install them individually. So this will save a lot of time. Now, for PBO2 settings and such, right, I know in this advanced mode there is this AMD overclocking, but I wouldn't want to use this at all. Reason being, right, let me show you. If I'm to set the PBO2 over here, right, take a look. There are no additional preset buttons over here, as in like preset configuration. And you have to set to advanced and to set the limit. Take a look at the PPT, TDC and EDC. All this, right, if you take a closer look, is in millivolt, milliampere and milliampere. So meaning to say, if let's say I want to set my PPT as 192 watt, I need to add 3 more zeros in order for it to run at 192 watt. So these are the things that which I will not use over here. These are the past. Instead, I make use of the overclocking. So on overclocking, right, you can just go to the advanced CPU configuration, then AMD overclocking, precision overdrive. Then you can set, see, the presets are all down here. So even if I'm not too lazy and to go manual, right, if I go to advanced, I can set my PPO limits to according to the wattage, ampere and such. So let's say again 192 watt, I can just type 192 and it becomes the wattage that I wanted. TDC on ampere 150 or 152, see, it just goes straight. And of course the famous curve optimizer, whereby a lot will just set all cores to negative, and depending on how good your processor silicon is, you can set it to negative 30 or sometime beyond that. But for me, right, for stability, though I know that my 9950X can run at negative 30, but I'll set it to negative 20 just for the sake of having it to be stable. And on top of which, I will play with the curve shaper, as in to fine tune. Now curve shaper is just like curve optimizer, where you fine tune the frequency and such. I will leave the URL on how this curve shaper works, but that is actually on another YouTuber who explained very clearly on curve shaper. Now besides this, right, on the overclocking menu, I will set the XMP profile, sorry, the expo profile to enable. So this will set according to what my RAM can cater for automatically. Or if you fancy, right, you can just adjust the bus speed manually, or you want to go higher and such, you can try. Then you can set the Infinity Fabric clock speed, up to you. But I'll just leave this to auto. And for this, right, majority will know what this is for. When you play games, right, it's often set to game 2. This is game mode 1 and this is game mode 2. It will increase performance and have higher FPS on your games. And for my take, I will definitely tweak this high efficiency mode to enable, whereby I set my memory cache latency to the tightest. So these are things that I will play with. Now for memory try, right, I did try this and it always failed, and I have to reset the CMOS, because there will be a time that you get stuck. So I don't really play with this. So these are things that I will do. And for voltage setting, normally, okay, which is the CPU core voltage, I will set to offset and have a offset mark to negative, followed by the offset to 0.05. These are the standards that I will do. The rest I'll leave it as it is. I will not touch. Oops. Now this is on the overclocking. Now for security, this just go through. You can set a administrative password to lock your configuration so that your siblings, right, can't just hit on the delete key to come to UEFI. When you come to UEFI, right, you're prompt for a password before they can access. If you allow your siblings to access and have their own profile, right, you can create a user password. Meaning to say, whatever profile your sibling have done, right, will not cross to your profile over here. Now, for boot, just a go through. Okay, these are the functions that you can do. And this, right, is the priority of your boot drive. For example, let's say your hard disk is your first M.2, your DVD is your second M.2, and your first M.2 is having Windows OS. Your second M.2 is having Linux. If you want to boot it to Linux, you just change the priority. See? So this is what it meant by boot order. And also, I've forgotten that your boot priority, you can use this icon at the lower left and to shift. See, when you shift this, right, take a look at this. Initially it was hard disk. So if I were to shift it back, see? So you can make use of this too. Last but not least, which is the save and exit, where you have all this function over here. I'm not going to go through this as is self-explained. My thoughts about this MSI X870E Carbon Wi-Fi. Aesthetically, it looks very pleasing, based on the fact that I like how MSI have designed the motherboard to have prints on the dragon crest, the logo, and the wordings. All are very subtle. In fact, the whole board is stealth black with silver linings and a touch of grey on the logos and the patterns. Nice touch. And best part is that personally I do not like ARGB, but it's okay with this board as there are only certain areas with ARGB, which is the dragon crest and the wording over here. And if you choose not to have this turned on, you can use this physical switch to turn off or to turn on. But based on the fact that when this is in the case, if you turn this off using this switch, right, if you want to turn it on, you will need to remove off the side panel and to, you know, fiddle to turn this switch. And sometime at the bottom, right, there might be obstacle whereby you can't reach out to this switch. So MSI have done a very clever idea whereby you have a smart switch at the back where I show you can program it. You can use this to turn on and off the ARGB lightings. Next will be the M.2 mechanism. I love how they have actually designed the mechanism. It's toolless, as you can see. I can just lift up and such. And there are plenty of M.2s for you to slot in. And also to the fact that, as I have emphasized on how they design the holding area, right, where you have this thermal pad with the thermal pad covers, same goes to the top. They have a separate rubber stud. So if you have a single M.2 chipset, right, you can just slot in, remove the top and to cover it. But for some of the motherboards, right, they do not have this separator. So you need to remove off the bottom cover, whereby due to the fact that the M.2 is so near to the bottom thermal pad, so instead of melting the plastic cover, right, you have to remove it off. So that's the problem. A well thought design. And another thing is that the locking mechanism on the GPU, as I've shown you, right, this is great. This will remain unlocked. You don't have to hold on it. Some of the motherboards you have to hold on it and to use the other hand, right, to pull it out. But with this say, right, when you click on this is unlocked, right, you are using both hands to hold your graphic card, and sometimes the graphic card is very heavy. So there might be accident if you were to press this and to hold on this button and to feeder a very heavy graphic card. So another brilliant idea from MSI to have locked this in unlocked position, to have both hands to handle your GPU. So this is one thing good about it. And another thing about this board is that there are tons of USB port. And I'm shocked that all these are 10 gig transfer rate, all the type A port, and inclusive of the new type C, which is USB 4 that has 40 gig transfer rate. And also this are of 10 gig too, which is nice. And on top of it, right, it does give you two Ethernet, or should I say RJ45 connection, which is 2.5 gig and 5 gig. So one you might use on your internet, the other one you can use on the Nash if you have a Nash server. Well done. Now coming to the cons itself, since I'm paying this premium price, right, I would expect that to have a back plate of this motherboard to keep the rigidity and structure of the motherboard. Then next thing is that for this Ethernet port, right, I do appreciate that they do come in 2.5 gig and 5 gig. But for country like myself, we have a 10 gig Ethernet broadband service. So we can make use of 10 gig instead of 5 gig. So with this say, right, since these are backward compatible, it will be a nicer idea to have a 10 gig port and a 5 gig port. Yep. And another thing about this board, though I mentioned that all the bells and whistles and some minor flaws, right, the only thing that I do not like is the fan layout. Yeah, you have total of 7 fan headers, 3 here, then you have 3 here, and 1, I believe, hang on, oh, 3 here, 3 at the top, 1 over here, total 7. I wish the MSI can cater another 4-pin PWM fan header right behind the M.2. Now let me show you why. If you have that, right, for your top fans, your front fan and your bottom fan is all covered with all the headers over here, no problem. But for your rear fan, right, in order for me to plug to the header, I have to route the cable all the way down and to plug it over here. If you have one over here, which you can see there is some space over here, if you were to cater here, right, I'll be able to plug with a shorter length to plug the rear fan to this header. So this is something which I hope MSI will consider. Now for this board, right, since it's actually of a premium price, who is this board for? I would say that hardcore content creators, due to the fact that you have tons of USB port to transfer your data, and probably you have your own NAS server that needs fast transfer rate and a fast internet, and also tons of storage to do your 3D rendering, content creations and such. And also for 3D rendering, right, you have a lot of memory, as in like up to 256 gig. So this is what I feel that this board is meant mainly for hardcore content creators and 3D renderers or editors. And in the meantime, right, if those content creators and editors, right, would like to play some games, right, this board is catered for you. But if you are into something like gaming itself and you don't need so much M.2s and don't need such big capacity and so much of this USB port, right, I will not advise you to purchase this board. I'm so sorry to say this, MSI, I could be very honest, because gamers, right, if you don't use all this, you're paying the board for premium features, but yet you're not using the functions, which I find that it's not really appropriate. So these are my thought about this board itself. With this said, I'd like to thank MSI to have provided this board for me to share with you guys, and to GoBell to have done the arrangement on the delivery. If you guys are new to my channel, welcome to my channel. If you like my content, do remember to subscribe and to click on the notification bell button. Till then, take care, goodbye, see ya.